my guru, Dr. C.K. Prala, taught me A is greater than R. If you have the aspiration, resources happen, which is the true story of HCL. 1.86 lakhs, nothing, right? But if we then create such a large company from that, it's all about having the aspiration to do it. And that's what makes it successful. When we started, we needed money, we needed a license, we had nothing. And we sort of managed to get everything done. And a lot of startups I meet, I say, mere paas ye nahi hai, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this. I said, if you have the aspiration, everything will fall in place. Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Shibulal, sir, thank you for joining us. There's a man here, co-founder Infosys, needs no introduction. But sir, just for context setting, what we're doing is asking some questions around the formative years of the companies and the people sitting up, and then we'll open it out for the audience to ask questions. So good that you're on stage. I had another question planned for you. The hardest challenge you faced in early years, and how did you navigate it?
So, Infosys started in 1981. So those days when you travel abroad, the first question somebody will ask you is about snake charmers and cows on the road. That was the first question you will be asked. So one of the hardest challenges which we had, and I'm sure everyone else will agree, is the fact that India itself was an unknown commodity at that time. It was not accepted as a technology hub. And we were not known for being a leader in technology at that time. So we were not only building an organization, we were actually, and I'm sure other peers of ours at that time also, we were also fighting the battle of what I call liability of origin, right? Because we were from India, there was a lot of liability associated with it. So that I would think one of the hardest challenges which we faced in the formative years of Infosys.
Thank you. I'll move to Anup. Having had a couple of successful exits, how do you handle decision making like that, especially when the stakes are high and everything is so uncertain?
Well, I think I'll go with what Ajay sir just said. If you have the aspiration. So the way I define it is like this, Divya. If success is a function of hard work, and you say T tends to infinity, hard work and time, and T tends to infinity, then you will always have success, right? The problem is that T does not tend to infinity. You have a time when you'll have to stop because you don't have the resources or the capital to do it. So the challenge is really, how do you do it within that fixed time frame, which will let your capital, help you to pursue. But then, I also like his statement that if you have the right aspirations, I think resources will kind of follow. So being at it, focused, and having a great go-to-market strategy, I think will let a reasonable person to succeed, is my take. I mean, I keep telling people that business is something that you can learn. You'll fail, but you keep on doing it, and after a few times, you'll learn the trick of the trade, and you can move forward.
Thank you for that. I was at the Bangalore Tech Summit last week, and there was this wonderful women's panel on stage, and because we have Priyanka, it would be a wasted opportunity for me not to ask. There was a theme running at the BDS stage that said, women's career growth goes hand in hand with their biological clocks. How do you then decide you want to put one forward or the other, and then how do you juggle both, given that you've had 2-3 startups and successful growth companies?
Hi guys, good evening. It's such a wonderful setting to be here with the ocean right next to us. And I actually want to just say something. The startup ecosystem today stands on the shoulders of giants. And all of us here are here because these guys kind of tread the path. So first, maybe give them a big round of applause, please. Having said that, I'm not the best person to answer your question because my life has really been in reverse. I got married at 20, I had my first child at 26, I had my second child at 30, I started my first company at 32. I sold my first company at 42. I became a venture partner, and now I'm starting up again. So I really do feel that a lot of these things become tropes for us to discuss on panels. But gender agnostic thinking says that what everyone said, aspiration matters, having the will matters, resources will follow. Those things stand true as much for men as for women, which is not to negate that it is harder for women, right? I am traveling, I have a son in London, I have a daughter who's in the hotel. I'm constantly thinking, have they eaten, are they sleeping, what are they doing? I don't know if fathers kind of work on that much presence in their kids' life, but mothers do. So while it is harder for women in certain ways, there is bias, all of these things, conscious, unconscious, they all. But as women, we need to find our voice. We should just not take no for an answer. And I guess I'm sitting here, I'm feeling kind of slightly awed by the fact that I am sitting here. It is because I just didn't understand the word no. Investors would say no. I'm like, doesn't matter, we'll find someone else. Clients would say no. There are other clients out there. I mean, anything. As long as you don't hear the word no and you carry on and you're reasonable, which I think is extremely important, I think you'll be fine, man or woman.
Great answer. Also very much in line with the theme the women were saying. Guys, at this stage, you all should gather your questions because this session is really yours. I'm just piquing your interest and then we'll hand over. Ajay, I'll come to you again. We know how HCL has scaled over the last few decades. And this is a problem the founders usually face, which is the pressure to grow versus the need to be financially stable. How do you juggle that decision?
You see, as long as you have planned your scaling and growth, and the scaling and growth needs to be parallelly done with funding. And therefore, if you've planned your growth and funding together, then there's no way you'll fail. But of course, the big challenge is, will you meet your numbers? And if you don't meet your numbers, the funds also go away because they're not good enough. So I think the most critical aspect which I see about founders and startups is that a lot of founders, startups, and CEO founders, they get so enamored with the product that they have created that they don't look at the most critical aspect, which is accounting, finance, and sales and marketing. So that is something that all of you must correct. From the beginning, you should believe that your accounting finance is in good shape, because all of us who invest into startups get very worried when we don't get proper, clear numbers. And that becomes a problem when you go to VCs and you go to get more and more money. They will look at your financials very deeply before you get even 1 rupee. So I think that's something they should pay a lot of attention to. And if they do that, then they will succeed. The second part I talk about is sales and marketing. I always tell all CEOs that you should be the best salesperson in your organization. And if you don't know how to sell, learn how to sell. Because it's not difficult. It's not as if you're born salesman. Anybody can learn to sell. So that's something that I always tell startups, and that's something that I would leave behind for all of you, because you can learn selling anytime.
Thank you for that. That was the exact answer actually a VC was telling me.
Actually, if you read my book, there's a separate chapter I've written on salesmanship. Because I think that's the most critical part of entrepreneurship.
Would you like to add to that?
ये तो कोई किताब ही नहीं खरीदेगा.
Oh, well, I was saying that's exactly what a VC said, you know, that when I see passionate founders, I get a little worried because I know they're not seeing beyond their product. What's happening to your finance statement? What's happening to your sales team? What's happening to all these things? Great. Okay, we'll touch upon company culture, and this is something I've personally wanted to know, you know. I had a startup myself, and the culture that I wanted to exuberate in that startup was great when it was 5 people. How do you then, at the size of Infosys and HCL, take that culture and replicate it into thousands of people? How do you maintain the fabric of your company?
So actually, if you look at Infosys, for the first 10 years or so, the culture was more tacit than explicit. We had the co-founders, and of course Mr. Murthy was there. Everyone kind of followed each other, and the culture was built over a period of time, but it was still tacit. By the time we were about 10 years into our journey, we realized that an explicit articulation of the culture is required. What is expected of someone who is in the organization from a transaction perspective? So in fact, the Infosys value system, which was created, was a collective endeavor. It was not a top-down approach. By then we were probably 1,000 people, and we sat together, the leadership sat together, we discussed, and we came up with a clearly articulated culture. So I think that is very important. If you want to build an organization with culture, I think it has to be articulated. Tacit is okay when you are 5, but when you are 50, it is better to be explicit. Number one. Number two, I think in Kannada there is a saying, Tada Raja Yada Praja. That means the leadership has to walk the talk. So whatever culture which you are putting on the table, whatever it is, whether it is honesty, transparency, fairness, meritocracy, or corporate governance, you have to walk the talk. And it always comes down to the leaders who are in the organization, and actually one person most often, because the person who is heading the organization. You have to walk the talk. You have to follow the culture. You cannot have two different rules. One set of rules for me and one set of rules for the rest of the organization. So that is very, very important. And lastly, there has to be an incentive and a disincentive for cultural adherence and cultural non-adherence, right? Because you would come across a situation where you have to encourage people to follow the culture. So you can recognize people, you can give awards, you can celebrate, you can build new role models, all that you can do. At the same time, if you find something which is not working, if you have found somebody who is not following the culture and creating a violation, then you have to be willing to take the tough decision, right? And the tough decision can be very difficult, because you most often find these issues with high performers, right? Many times you find the value violation with high performers or people who think you are critical to the organization and you hesitate to take the action. So that sets you back quite a lot. So 3 things: articulate, lead by example, and be willing to celebrate as well as take disciplinary action if required.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Those 3 points were very, very clear. And we'll flip it, right? We'll go to the founder's perspective. Wearing the Kalaari hat now, Priyanka, is there something in a founder's personality or the company culture that appeals to a VC more than anything else? And you say, yeah, that's who I want to invest in.
See, look, it's a very simple thing. It's the founder's DNA that is the first culture, right? And whatever the founder is open, non-open, that basically by osmosis becomes the first culture, because startups, by definition, we don't start out by putting the culture plan, defining the culture before we kind of get the company going. So I'll tell you a quick story, right? So when Popexo was a few people, I knew everyone, right? And that was okay. When we became 50 people, I didn't know everyone. And then culture was being passed around by Chinese whispers. And people were assuming that certain things were culture because of what they were observing in the company. And that began to create problems even at that stage. It's only like 50 people. So at that time, we actually had to sit down and say and define, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is what we not do. And that is culture, right? Once you're able to do that, and you really kind of drill it down, that really matters. It also matters is when VCs are looking at you as a founder and they're looking at your company as an organization. They might not have like a checklist item that, oh, what is the culture of this particular startup, but it comes across very, very clearly, right? And it's very easy to spot red flags if governance is going to be an issue, if they're not on top of the numbers, if the finance team is basically being sidelined, if the founder doesn't know her numbers, right? All of those are basically hallmarks of a culture that doesn't value those things. And they then become red flags, and it becomes very, very difficult to get funding. And just a real small tip, right? No matter what size of startup you are, whether you are thinking of starting up or whether you've just started up, just start to maintain sanctity of data, right? Your basic corporate documents, your numbers, all of that. Just keep them in a place that's always ready. So tomorrow when a VC comes calling, you can almost automatically give it to them, right? And that shows a lot of planning on the founder's part, and it does give the VC confidence that this is an organization that takes these things seriously. And at the end of the day, that's basically what really matters to the VC, because the last thing that anyone wants to get stuck in is a corporate governance situation.
Thank you for that, Priyanka. We'll slide slightly and we'll pivot a little bit to a unique problem that we are facing today with cities that are doing well in globalization. And Anup, I'm coming to you with this one. So Bangalore, you know, has had unprecedented growth, a lot of global attention, and now the government is struggling with how do we maintain our identity while still being global players, right? Is the Kerala government giving that a thought? And if so, what are the aspects that you'll have put into play for that one?
Interesting. I think it was Jay, who was the CEO of T-Hub, who today morning in the Beyond Borders discussion said that there is this intense socialistic attitude that is there in Kerala, which makes life very difficult for an entrepreneur to make people to work, right? But I look at it the other way around. I think we have everything that is required to create a quality product. So Ajay was today morning saying that, get away from the services mindset, get into the product mindset. What does a product mindset takes? It takes creativity. It takes a little bit of rebellion. It needs healthy people, highly educated people. It needs a larger conglomeration of resources. I think we have all that. And that is created over the past several years because of the social security reforms that the government and the multiple governments have been doing. Now, the biggest challenge is that at some point of time, government cannot keep on funding a welfare economy. At some point of time, you need to create your own wealth. And I think now is the time, and we should actually make use of everything that we have been doing in terms of social security, decentralized development, because we have resources available across the state, and try to create companies all across the state of Kerala. That's how we will see it, and doing it is not an easy task, but I think if we have support of the right corporates, we will be able to do it.
Interesting how this is now a government problem, right? When you get where you're going, then how do you maintain these aspects of it, right? I'll move along to a little bit of mental health and wellness, and this will be for Shibu sir and Ajay, of course, is habits, routines that you have maintained that keep you upright, mental health, etc., etc.
So I am actually in Infosys, at least I was considered as one of the most disciplined person, which is, I think, maybe an exaggeration, but I am quite disciplined because I think high performance requires discipline. See, if you want to do anything in high performance, right? If you want to work, you want to build an organization, you want to be a founder, you want to be a software engineer, if you want to be in high performance, you have to be disciplined. So discipline is a must if you want to be in high performance, and also if you want to achieve anything, I believe that discipline is a must. So I have been quite disciplined. I was having a hard time just now because I eat dinner at 6. And I did have my dinner actually before coming here. But in my mind, discipline is one of the core foundations on which you can build your life as well as your work life, as well as your professional life, as well as your external life. And that will allow you to be very focused, very committed, and very present. So there is this debate about the 60-hour, 70-hour work week which keeps going on. So last event I was there, somebody asked me this question, what do you think, Shibu, about this debate? And I clearly said, I am not a good person to ask because I still work 70 hours. So it's not a good answer I can give. But then when I am with the family, so I am actually home and with the family, I always focus on presence. That means when I am there, I will be present. I will keep my cell phone away, I will keep my iPad away and be present where I am present. So I always say, try to be present rather than, so look at the quality rather than the quantity. Because with our kind of life, and I am sure your kind of life with 2 children, and I see this with my daughter, I think quantity of time is difficult. But then when you have little, you don't have that luxury of quantity, you have to create quality, which means presence in my mind. So discipline and presence.
Thank you. It's true. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, actually, I always believe and continue to believe that you should have fun while working. If you don't love your work, then don't talk about this bullshit work-life balance. Work, you must love. And you're not being forced to do what you're doing. If you are a founder, you've created a company, you love what you do, and that's why you are there, and you should be working 28 hours a day. How does it matter? At the end of the day, you're working for you and your team. Okay? So those are kind of things that I believe in. And I also have a very strong belief that you should connect with your employees very deeply. Okay? So when we were very small, it was different. When we grew, it became very different. But one thing, and again I'm going to sell my book. Read in my book, there's a chapter called The People Tree. All right? Now, when we became very large, and in Noida alone we had close to 4,000 employees, every new year I used to go and meet every employee and shake their hands and wish them Happy New Year. And let me tell you, that created a fantastic connect among all of us, and that feeling was amazing in HCL. And for 7 continuous years, we were number 1 in employee satisfaction. So that is really what it takes to be very clear about how you communicate, what you communicate. And as Shibulal said, specifically keep communicating. I think that will work very, very well.
Guys, round of applause for the panel. And you've been great. Thank you for listening so patiently. And thank you to the Kerala Startup Mission team and all to have us here. Thanks, guys.